Netanyahu losing support from White House. Recent reports indicate that there have been significant developments in the relationship between the U.S. and Israel, particularly concerning Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's support from the White House. President Joe Biden has communicated to Prime Minister Netanyahu that future U.S. support for Israel's actions in Gaza will be contingent upon Israel taking new steps to protect civilians and aid workers. This comes after a phone call where President Biden urged for an immediate ceasefire and emphasized the need for Israel to implement specific measures to address humanitarian concerns. Furthermore, there's an analysis suggesting that Netanyahu is facing challenges in maintaining control within Israel, which is complicating the U.S. ability to work with him. During the Israel-Hamas conflict, the situation is further strained by Netanyahu's efforts to stay in office amidst corruption charges and a recent Israeli Supreme Court ruling against his judicial overhaul efforts. Additionally, there has been a warning from President Biden that Israel risks losing global support due to what has been described as indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. This shift in tone from the U.S. administration marks a potential change in the dynamic of U.S.-Israeli relations and reflects growing concerns about the humanitarian impact of the conflict. U.S. and Israel relations. The U.S.-Israel relationship has been experiencing some tension, particularly concerning the U.S.'s support for Israel's military actions. President Biden has emphasized the need for Israel to take new steps to protect civilians and aid workers in the conflict with Hamas. This includes discussions on increasing humanitarian assistance and the possibility of tactical pauses to allow civilians to safely depart from areas of ongoing fighting. Challenges for Netanyahu. Prime Minister Netanyahu is facing internal challenges within Israel, which are affecting his position and complicating the U.S.'s ability to work with him. Biden's warning. President Biden has warned that Israel risks losing global support due to its military tactics in Gaza, particularly the bombing campaigns, which have been described as indiscriminate. This warning reflects a shift in the U.S. administration's stance and indicates a potential change in the dynamic of U.S.-Israeli relations. Hostage negotiations. There have also been ongoing hostage negotiations taking place in Qatar, which President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu discussed. The negotiations are a critical aspect of the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, and there is an urgent need to increase the flow of life-saving aid to those in need. Future U.S. support. The White House has communicated that future U.S. support for Israel's actions will require changes to Israeli policy. This includes strategies to defeat Hamas while protecting the civilian population and ensuring the safe delivery of assistance throughout Gaza. Ceasefire negotiations. Efforts to establish a ceasefire have been ongoing, with the U.S. leveraging its influence to press for a full and sustained ceasefire by both Israel and Hamas. This is seen as crucial to prevent further loss of civilian life and suffering, given the continuing bombardment and deepening humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Enforcement of U.S. law and arms policy. The Biden administration has been urged to fully enforce U.S. law and arms policy to ensure accountability and adequate humanitarian aid delivery. This includes ensuring that American origin arms are used in accordance with international humanitarian law. Diplomacy for a just resolution. Diplomatic efforts are focusing on a just resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, moving away from bilateral normalization efforts and towards multilateral approaches. There is a global consensus that returning to the status quo before the conflict is impossible. Two-state solution. The United Nations Secretary-General has underscored that a two-state solution is the only way to end the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Recent rejections of this formula by Israel's leaders amid the humanitarian crisis have been firmly opposed by the international community. International diplomatic efforts. A proposed U.S. resolution supports global efforts to establish an immediate and sustained ceasefire as part of a deal that releases hostages and allows for a more durable peace to alleviate humanitarian suffering. Network diplomacy. There is a focus on network diplomacy, which involves cooperation with regional and international partners to diffuse tensions, encourage improvements on the ground, and advance political negotiations toward a two-state solution. These diplomatic efforts are part of a broader strategy to address the immediate humanitarian needs and to work towards a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in the Middle East. The situation is complex, and the success of these efforts will depend on the cooperation and commitment of all parties involved.